Well, hello everybody. My name is Terry Tao, and welcome to another Facebook episode of Hmong American Weekly. It's our weekly discussion on Sunday evenings where we talk about building political power and political consciousness in the Hmong community. I'm joined this evening by my regular co-host, political scientist Paku Hung, and then Minnesota House Representative Jae Hyung from District 67B in St. Paul. As we tell people at the start of the show, we began this program right before the 2020 elections because there's been a lot of misinformation in our community. And we believe the best way to combat this is to actually build a political consciousness by doing both conversations that talk about policy and politics. We are here to do both education, but also provide some analysis too of current issues. We all don't hide that we're Democrats, but we also see this show as part politics and part civics too as well. And so this is really part of our continued work. You know, between Jay and Paku and I, we've had many years, 20 plus years of campaign work. And so we are always really excited to come share what we know and bring up people who also know about this field too. So before we get started tonight, I did want to acknowledge that in particular, it's been a tough week for a lot of Hmong folks, right? And so with the killing of the 6 Asian women in Georgia, but on top of that, there was another murder suicide in the community today. And so it's been a really hard week. So I just wanted to check in to see if Jay, Paku, any kind of thoughts or reflections, what you've been hearing from people, kind of how you all been doing.
Yeah, so yesterday I was part of a panel about women keeping our heads above water during this pandemic, and and then earlier this afternoon I was part of a panel with the KD Phi, so sorority, international sorority of Asian American women or Asian women, and in both of those places you could feel on the one hand just the pain and the sorrow that people were feeling. And on the other hand, there were just like no words to describe the mass murder that happened last Tuesday. And so I think that this is a time of mourning, and I think we need to allow people to mourn and to feel what they're feeling. But tomorrow, and when tomorrow comes, we have to organize because we cannot continue to stay silent. I mean, anti-hate crimes against Asian Americans have been escalating ever since COVID, ever since the president of the United States called the COVID virus the China flu or Kung Fu, or, all the derogatory names that he called it. And we can't be silent. I think too often Asian Americans are on the one hand between kind of the myth of the model minority, that we're like the perfect minority and people use us as an excuse to say that racism doesn't exist. And on the other hand, we're like the perpetual foreigner, right? No matter what we do, we can never fit in. And in that space where we occupy, all this violence happens to us and we are invisible. And I think what happened last Tuesday really broke that kind of fogged mirror that we are here and we're not going to take this type of discrimination and violence. But all around, I've just been feeling a lot of sorrow. I just can't wait for the day when people of color, whether we live or die, is not dependent on whether a white person is having a good day, right? Like it's just not acceptable. It's 2021. But that's how I've been feeling. What about you, Terry or Jay?
I think, first of all, I want to speak to our Hmong audience, the older generation who have been victimized by this. And if you've been paying attention, one of our peers, Harold Levening, Giovanni's father, who resides on the east side, faced this horrible incident when he was out taking to leave his grandchildren to the bus stop. Hai tôi cho mấy chỗ nào thì bỏ ta bé bỏ ta lúc cha nhung nuôi lúc cha nhung cứ nè một cái thứ sang từ bây giờ tới lúc họ especially từ bây giờ mong cứ nó được lúc tới chân họ bé bỏ ta ta xin lỗi mà giờ tôi nên có chuyện bé vì cho họ có một thứ cảm mà có phải có chỗ nói họ ban số cái bao cáiต้นชายcho họ béยิงนั่นนู่นนี่นอนXác để sơ ha rút lâu hoặc tế mình nó bó ta y nó chế in ya fu president now Trump ni cho lu na halu chỉ trong go để cho lấy một cho tôi từ nhà bé xíu xíu hẳn hồi rồi của bé rồi của bé có bao nhiêu số tiền sản để cơ sở này sản để muốn gì bé những chuyện luôn ra thì lúc bán sao cho là lúc cha nói giờ lúc chạy cứ số tiền một cái nhau xa có về có chỗ là ni chỉ phụ chỉ bán bé có sự là chuyện mà có số tiền sản để cho phát triển một bé đó là最终的背影，路设计路地带路完成的。你冇跟不能对我这样嘅基础基础嘅家嘅我到了佢對現在佢夢想佢都不我到前年呢就應用咗咩嘢名，要種個有咩冇講太好就個到了個有咩我知道用用是係呢哈，我冇把套路。就咩部門咩保安個咩或者上一個 report 嘛，真正裏面說了 Department of Human Rights 個波到打磨咗對面的知識，然後就會比較定如何係補查嚟包打也如在用我們嘅最少然後就都能陪我哋講就俾我哋嚟幫查嘅把個數據上嚟。
Joji, I think too, I think that the week too is it's just a reminder of how real the violence is in our communities, whether it's from within our own families or it's from external folks, right? It's weighing heavily, right? So I mean, and for me, I'm a parent, so it always is, you're trying to, protect your kids, but you also think about all of our kids too and how they're being impacted by this. So it's been a hard week. I won't say this, but I think Paco, you're right. How do we organize? How do we continue to build power, educate, use these platforms, so that we're in a better place? Because we talked this morning, I was in a different chat where we talked about narratives, and when we change narratives, we can start to change policy and change the way people think and perceive us. Because I think that's we know the road. It's a long it's a long road to to work. It's the long game when we do this work in politics, when we're trying to fight for values and decency and for our humanity. So thanks. So having said that, and that very heavy note, I'm going to transition to how we start to build that power, right? And in particular, tonight, we're going to talk about this topic called precinct caucuses. So in Minneapolis, St. Paul, it is precinct caucus season. And so we are going to talk a little bit tonight. Tonight, we are joined by two guests who are helping lead up the precinct caucus process in both Minneapolis and St. Paul. And so real quick for the Hmong viewers, someone abaya shi ta ta ka la hai pu precinct caucus. So dong lu dong the shi gong na. And so yeah, day now that you should have laying took a should have pa Democrat that you pa Republicans la shi gong na. And so when I go be talk out to take on the DFL and the whole lu Minneapolis the whole St. Paul na to shi da be tai da pa ba acting by a cabe so ka ge la shi gong na. Ha chi da na ye go ma ha ka pa go be in claiming ji so có lúc trong nó tại vì lý do lúc trong nó chẳng chẳng lý do vì lý do này sẽ được biết rằng là giờ chủ mưu sĩ cộng là bên so Paku, do you tell us a little bit quick overview? What's a precinct caucus? Why should you participate?
That sounds great, Terry. Thank you so much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen really quick, you all, and I'm going to have just a slide deck. And what I'm going to do is I just want to talk a little bit about what precinct caucuses are. So precinct caucuses, I want to talk about why they're important. I'm going to talk about what they are and how it's sub-caucus just really quickly. And so this is really like a civics 101 class, right? And we know that in our political system, the way that it's broken up is by geography. Right. So we have people who represent us at the state level to the federal system, and those are the congressional districts. We have also people who represent us at the county district level. We call them county commissioners. They usually deal with things like health and human service issues, with large transportation issues. And then we also have our own states broken into Senate districts and House districts. So for example, someone like Jay is a member of the House of Representatives for our state legislature. And then we know that we all live in a city, and within each city, actually, we live in these places called wards. And oftentimes city councils, the people who represent us at the city level, they represent wards. And then actually even smaller than a ward is that we live in these things called precincts. And so oftentimes we know our state, we know our congressional district, we might sometimes even know what our county district is, although I think sometimes that can be a little bit obscure. We definitely know what our House and our Senate districts are. And we obviously know our city, but I think it actually is a little bit harder for people. They don't really know. If I ask someone on the street, hey, what ward do you live in? Oftentimes people don't know that. And they certainly, I think, don't know what their precinct is. I don't really know what my precinct is. And I've been involved in politics for like 25 plus years. But because of the way that our political system is set up, these are the places where we have to gather. These are like the units of governance that we operate in. And so we have to think about that. And when people ask, well, why are we doing precinct caucuses? It's because the precinct caucus is the first step. It's where we start to get to ward, to get to city, to get to the state legislature, to get to Congress in Washington, D.C. Cho nó mà cũng sự chúng mình thả about precinct caucus cho có lần đầu rằng đó là tại có nó bị cái chuyện hình na hát tu bố nó tại precinct caucus giá trị ta cũng hát ta only mà in order for meเข้าใจ precinct caucus giá trịนะมีจุดต่อเป้าhát ta ไปรู้หลานนะไปอย่าอีหายหนึ่งเนาะหายรู้ government นะปุยก็ยุ่งเป้าก็ยังรู้หลานตื่นแต่ก็ยังก็เป้าแต่ก็ยังรู้ congressional district ก็ตัวเป้าก็ยังรู้จอตื่นก็ตอนเดาจามาตัวจุดเป้าแต่ปนยังรู้ precinct ตื่นก็ precinct ยังเขาจะท่าใช่นะก็ยังจะล้างทำไปไม่ใช่เพราะแต่โอ้แต่ตัวนี้ยังรู้ precinct เนาะแต่พวกมาคาตาก็แต่ก็ยังรู้จอเนาะแต่พวกมาคาตาก็แต่ก็ยังรู้ district เนาะมุจก็ยังรู้หลานตื่นนะส่วนเขา precinct ยังเขาจะเจ๊งเห็นจะเขาอยากจะท่าเขาถึงอยู่ต่อเป้าอยู่ห้าวันต่อว่าจะเนี่ยอยู่ห้าต่อหมู่ว่าจะเนี่ยหมู่คลาห้าหมู่บอมาจนหนอชื่อ Okay, so we know that just historically precinct caucuses happen every time there's an election. And so like we knew last year we had a presidential election, and actually so many people were up for re-election or election, right? There was a presidential race, there was US Senate races, there was the congressional races, there's all the state legislature seats were up. And then we also actually in St. Paul, they actually had a special election. And one of the candidates who's running for school board, Jim Vu, he won actually that special election. But because it was a special election, now that seat is triggered into the regular kind of cycle. But prior to 2020, we also had, let's see, in 2019, we had the St. Paul City Council races. In 2018, we had the gubernatorial races, right? And a bunch of the state legislative seats were up. And then we saw in 2017, we had the St. Paul and Minneapolis mayor run, and then we had the Minneapolis City Councils. And since those seats are 4 years, it makes a lot of sense that this year, in 2021, we have both the St. Paul and Minneapolis mayors are up for re-election again. We have the Minneapolis City Councils up for re-elections. And then we actually have a bunch of school board races that are up for re-election, including another special election, which we talked about last week. So cho nói cái trong chuyện hình cho khó ở trên những cái trong cái là bóng bàn cho ít từ St. Paul hay từ Minneapolis mayor cha cho đang để đang cho tụi nó Minneapolis ấy cho thay cho nhau họ city council bây giờ các lúc là hay cho đang để nhau họ lúc St. Paul nó họ school board cho thay cho ấy rồi lúc cho chỉ cần nhau St. Paul bây giờ là mua ở nó chú trọng nó ha. Okay, so precinct caucuses are really important because they are the basis for which you get to the ward conventions where the actual endorsements happen. And endorsements, whether it's the Democratic endorsement or the Republican endorsements, those are important because the party endorsements allows people to have access to a lot of resources. Let's say like the VAN, which is the voter database. It also allows you to get access to a current to like the party list. But most importantly, when you get the endorsement, you get like a badge of approval. So a lot of times people may not know who you are, but if they say, I'm a Democrat or a Republican, and they see the Democratic seal of approval for you, then even though they don't know a lot about you, because of party ID, they'll probably most likely vote for you. And so that's why getting endorsements are really, really critical. Okay, so be charge be no jo ho ta ma be san ka to ne mu each conventions a be san ka jo Democrat or Republicans bo pa de bon ba ha as a chang ka to king na the president caucus jo copy mu o kondara. Okay, so I'm just going to go really quickly to, anybody can be a delegate as long as you're a citizen, you'll be eligible to vote. And this year election day is November 2nd, right? And you have to live in the area, And you can be a delegate as long as you say, I want to be a delegate at the precinct caucus level, and then you get voted for it. Now, just to be clear, if you want to move on to the ward convention where the endorsements occur, you have to be a delegate. So coming to the precinct caucuses, while awesome, is not enough if ultimately you want to vote in and endorse your candidate for that party's endorsement. So that's why this is like a two-step process. And that's why the first step, the precinct caucuses, are so critical. Okay, so what's going to happen in precinct caucus? I'm just going to go really quickly. You're going to go there and you're going to first check in, and they're going to tell you, oh, this is the precinct you have to go to. When you get to that specific room, which is your precinct, where you're all going to meet, all your neighbors going to meet, you have to sign in a form. That's like the sign-in form. That's like the attendance form. And that's the form that that party is going to use to say, oh, Pak Koo Heng really did show up. And that's the form that they use to figure out how many people are actually in that room. So it's really critical that you fill out that attendance form. Oftentimes you go to a precinct caucus, you get into your room and there's tons of people and you don't know that you have to fill in the sign-in sheet, and that can create a lot of problems later on. So make sure if you're going to precinct caucuses, sign in your precinct room, sign in that attendance sheet. And then the caucuses, there's actually an election really quickly to have someone run the meeting in your precinct caucus. And then most likely while you guys are meeting, the candidates are going to come through and they're going to give their speeches. So it's a great time to just hear candidates, but you guys are all there really because you want to get elected to be a delegate, right? And so this is where the precinct chair, that's the person that's running the precinct caucus for your precinct. That person is going to say, who wants to be a delegate to go to the ward convention? If you want to be a delegate, you need to raise your hand here. Right? And oftentimes each precinct only has a set amount of slots of delegates. So you might be in a precinct and maybe there are only 10 slots. And if you have only 8 people, that's awesome. All 8 of you get to become delegates. But most often what happens is that there are only 10 slots, but maybe 25 people want to become delegates. So what do we do when we have more people than we actually have slots? That's actually when we have to do sub-caucusing. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk a little bit about sub-caucusing. But I'm actually going to show, I'm not going to show a video, but I'm going to reference you all to a video later on where you can check out. And that video really goes into detail about how you do a sub-caucus. But a sub-caucus, again, is really important because that's when you have more people who want to be delegates than you have actual slots.
Okay, Paco, we're going to hold the sub-caucusing, till later, because we're going to have Garrison and Devin talk a little bit about this year's process, because it's a little different. I appreciate, you shared about when precinct caucuses were in person, but in particular, this year is a little different, much like last year, because of COVID. And so I'm going to transition over to, we'll talk about sub-caucusing in a little bit, because that's a really important piece. And then that would, and so, but I'm going to now turn over and ask our guests to talk a little bit about what it looks like, this precinct caucus process. What does the sign-in look like? Because this year it will be different. So, and then on the precinct caucus 凶咯，就係凶咯，莫佢加莫 COVID 嗰種嘅嘢，因為走咗啦，只係你把工業化係哋要冇被錄住嘅多，要冇識講被，實在冇識講 OK， 就有莫佢加莫嘅嘢，凶咯，你保佢有個買咯，喎，因為走咗啦嗱，你嘅 better talk 你可能都把 activate 實在。So, Devin, we'll start off with you in Minneapolis. You guys have got a lot of seats up. What does the process look like, and how does one participate? Walk us through a little bit.
Sure. So it's very easy. That's the biggest thing is so what Paku just explained is everything, all of those items are still happening, except they're all happening online on the internet. And so instead of normally you would go to caucus.dfl.org, find your precinct, and it will tell you the address of where you're having your caucus. Say it's a school gymnasium, you go to the gym, you sign in your name, and then they say, all right, who wants to be a delegate? If there's more people for delegate than there are slots, as Paku said, then you sub-caucus. So you go to your corner of the gymnasium. Candidate A, go in this corner. Candidate B, uncommitted, I'm not sure who I'm going to support yet. I'm going to go in this corner. So imagine all of that except on the internet. And the way that it works is you go to this caucus.dfl.org website. You type in your address. It gives you a form. This form is in 4 different languages, in English, Spanish, Hmong, and Somali. And it explains, so it'll ask for the information. When you sign into caucus, it'll ask for that same information. your address, your phone number, your email, ways that we can contact you. And then you also check a box that is what's called the caucus statement, that you affirm you're eligible to vote, that you live in your precincts, and that you'll be 18 years old by election day. And so it's pretty simple. You fill out this form. If you want to be a delegate, instead of raising your hand, you click a checkbox that says, I want to be a delegate to the ward convention, or I want to be a delegate to the city convention. And so if you check that box, you'll then get a second form that says, what are you interested in? Why, like write a little bit about why people should elect you. The only other thing I'll add, there's two things I'll add. So when you fill out this form, you'll have a list of all of the candidates that are running in the ward and at the city. And so you'll be able to rank them, list all the candidates you like in order for both of those. And what that does is that basically tells instead of normally you'd elect the person at the precinct level to be doing all of this calculation and determining all these numbers and stuff. So what we're doing is we're collecting this information and then on the back end creating ballots for all the entire city all at once. So you'll have the entire month of April to sign up. You fill out this form, and then the first 2 weeks of May we put together this ballot. You get it in your email the beginning of mid-May, and that's when you vote for your delegates at your precinct. So the actual business of electing delegates happens in mid-May, but you have the entire month of April to sign up. And the purpose of that is to build awareness, get people to tell their friends about it. And so, yeah, so like I said, it's pretty easy. You just sign in. A lot of the other information will just come to you in your email. If you don't have access to the internet, you can call us and leave a voicemail and we'll actually call you through it. That number is 612-552-4215. Again, you can call in any language, 612-552-4215. You can also text us as well in any language, 612-712-7461. Again, for texting, 612-712-7461. So it's available to anyone, even if you don't have the internet. But like I said, it's what Paku just explained, except all online and behind the scenes. So a lot less, you don't really have to think very hard, and just all you got to do is sign up and vote when it's time to vote.
So cũng thay mình chỉ có tập vận hay nè, tôi cho biết sinh nhớ hậu lưu do Minneapolis trong non là chỉ có bắt tập cô thì bài cho cái yêu sách mua sĩ công, nên trong những mua sĩ công bị lưu chỉ cần tới mua đó lựa cho nhớ là ba Democrats mua sĩ công,但是trong non là chỉ là online rồi, so you chỉ sử dụng you look computer mua bị lưu website là hay hu caucus.dfl.org em muốn chia đại đỡ phiếu nè, giờ tới các phiếu nó chỉ có chỉ là hay để có những chung nó có những một giờ ít tuổi năng có bên bảo tồn bà có tới một sẵn sàng là họ chỉ là cái nhỏ hồ lưu ra Minneapolis nó chỉ hồ này and sorry Devin, real quick, are you putting names on the there are names of candidates on the actual when you sign up on the form, right?
Yep, they will pick, they'll see all the names and they can pick as many or as little as they want.
Yeah, hold till you feel that nó chỉ trong nó chỉ you bỏ cho nên cho sẽ được cho bé cho nên là kia trong nó nè, nó chỉ you site nó chỉ lấy kia cho chỉ lúc blog hình tu nó chỉ sẽ được một phiếu nó ta, nó chỉ lúc chỉ hình tu nó thì li bắt cô hay là mà chat một site cho thế chat để một bắt chơi rồi cho bắt Democrat trong nó nè. AI đến này chỉ mua internet nó chỉ lấy giờ ta lên nó chỉ là mà sai email tôi này giờ đến này chỉ mua internet nó chỉ lấy mua từ stung nó giờ đến này sao mua hôn đó là thà giờ tới yêu hui yêu cho hay tới yêu mong yêu cho li là mà đại家好多都yêu là mình thấy tới này mong là tôi xài ta tôi khe yêu ta từ stung này đâu GGR blow REG giờ đâu GGR blow REG nè, để cho tôi sẽ tông nè. Jay?
Jay, I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. And so, there's the same question. What's the process this year for precinct caucuses in St. Paul? How does one participate, and why is it online this year? để của Yon Garrison như từ thơ từ sai cho pa cái mình Democrat cái nhau từ luôn trong sinh phò hoặc là tăng tăng cứu hàng a trẻ thọ từ sự tham mình chỉ nhau từ bên lúc sinh nó chỉ bên mò ở bên bumper Parkman tức là mình bên bumper DFL Democrat nó chỉ thì cũng muốn ở bên tụi cho muốn tụi cho lúc cả cứ có sẽ tăng cho lúc Parkman nó chỉ từng bởi nhau有钱马都是嘛，要等到 county 你摸你一头头有晒，the state 你摸你一条佢有佢都在钱马哈，the city 你帮我不叫钱，因為佢上網就係有到大學 city council 啊，school board 呢就叫拍佢們多晒 board 就係 city 呢就 garrison 就一頭頭呢哦，garrison if you can share with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, let me just say, Paku, I needed you when I first moved to Minnesota 8 years ago because that was a master class of explaining caucuses and conventions that I'm still trying to figure out. So thank you for that. No, the process this year will be similar to what Minneapolis is doing. It'll all be virtual. I mean, with the pandemic still happening, and although we're seeing, vaccinations coming into play, we know that there's still a lot of folks who may not feel comfortable yet being in those type of spaces with a number of folks. And so for the safety of everyone who's participating, we're having the entire process be virtual this year. So similar to Minneapolis, we'll be having, instead of in-person caucus, we'll be doing caucus registration online. And I'm going to share my screen really quick to kind of go through a few of the key moments that we'll be having throughout the course of this process that is actually starting now. So I'm sure many folks who live in St. Paul have already received a number of emails from me announcing the start of our caucus registration period. That started on March 12th and will go until April 9th. So a month, folks will have an opportunity to go online to our website, stpauldfl.org, and register. So in the registration form, we'll be collecting a couple of things. We'll be, same as Minneapolis, getting folks contact information, email, phone number. We'll have a link to the Secretary of State's office so folks can identify which ward and which precinct they live in. We'll also be asking folks to indicate on the form whether or not they want to be a delegate to the ward and the city convention. One thing to be clear is that if you want to be a delegate for the city convention, you must be a delegate for the ward convention. And the last piece, what we're doing, since we won't be having sub caucuses in person, and it's quite the interesting process, even when it is in person, we're going to be having folks rank their top 5 sub caucuses that they want to join that we have listed on the registration form. So on the form, the sub caucuses that'll be included will be a sub caucus for each of the campaigns for mayor and for school board that are indicating that they're running to seek the DFL endorsement, as well as some issue-based sub caucuses that we put an ask out to the community to get a sense of what are some of the issues, especially for those folks who haven't yet landed on a candidate. To let us know some of the issues that are important to you. And so you will have a list of a few of those top ranked sub caucuses that you'll be able to choose from. And the way it will work is that, in the event, and I'm sure you all will go through the whole sub caucusing process, in the event that your first choice sub caucus is not viable, then you'll be placed into your second choice. And if that one's not, then your third, and so on and so forth. Until you get placed in a sub caucus. And then after that, once we determine who the delegates are that are going to the ward convention, after the ward convention, we'll be selecting delegates who will go to the city convention. And then at the city convention is where we will be endorsing for mayor. And then we have 3 seats that we'll be endorsing for school board. Those will be 3 4-year term seats. And then we'll have 1 special election seat that we'll be endorsing for, and that's a 2-year term seat. And so that'll be happening over the next couple of months. And so for precinct caucuses, one thing that I do want to make sure that folks are aware of, because we'll be sending some mail, just knowing that with this opportunity for us to be all virtual. It presents, yes, an opportunity, but also a challenge and a risk that some folks may try to get involved who may not be Democrats. And so we want to make sure that we have a process that is fair and safe and secure for everyone who's participating. So we'll be mailing out a postcard to everyone. After everyone registers, we're sending out a postcard. On the postcard will be a code in which folks will be able to go online, or they can call it in to our number, and then they'll be able to provide that code. And that code is basically your ticket in. That ensures that you say who you say you are, that you live at the address that you say that you live, and then we can move forward with the rest of the process. And so, just like Minneapolis, although most of this content is virtual, if there are any folks who may not have internet access, we have paper forms that folks can fill out. They can reach out to either the campaigns, or they can call the St. Paul DFL to request that. When it comes to the verification code, you can call in and leave a voicemail with your name and with your code, so we can verify that way, just to ensure that everyone who wants to participate gets a chance to participate.
Garrison, ni ku pamin ji ku botan ever tutan so hu pa Minneapolis po pla po le ja jan ni. Then support me to know me site to hu chong DFL.org la shi me ma contact information ta po mon na to shi ni ti zo play le ku Minneapolis po pla po ko ja ku me to ke no yang shi tan le ku jo yo I know to me po me sai me yo me ni tong jan da mo ta ne mo kana ke me to me to lo ye me son da to je pe ma ta I think that goes wrong. To me.
Great, thanks, Jay. So Garrison and Devin, like, this is an unusual year. Both of you have citywide elections, and it's a year that just came out of the pandemic, or we're still in the pandemic, but people are starting to come out with the vaccine. What are you guys hearing from residents in both Minneapolis and St. Paul? What are the issues that voters care about? Devin, do you want to go first, and then Garrison, you'll go next?
Sure. So I would say public housing, well, public housing as well, but public safety and housing. Obviously, our housing is a perennial issue. So I've lived in Minneapolis since 2010, and I've seen prices go up. I came here from Chicago. A lot of people I know actually in Minnesota, in the Twin Cities, come from the Chicago area, and so seeing sort of cost of rents go up considerably over the years, and then sort of the other side of that with the homelessness crisis, which just continues to grow as well. So I think housing, of course, is going to be the biggest issue besides public safety for the obvious reasons. I would say too, businesses, that's especially on the north side, growing our local businesses, investing in local businesses. Same thing with downtown. With the pandemic, there's 200,000 workers normally downtown that are not there right now, and so that's been really tough on businesses. I have a lot of friends that work in the hotel industry and related restaurant, so recovery around those kind of industries as well, I would say, are some of the big three.
Great, thank you. What about you, Garrison? What do you think are the main issues that voters care about in St. Paul this year?
Yeah, a lot of the same things: affordable housing, homelessness, issues around racial equity and social justice. So for sure, for St. Paul, is creating a public safety approach that is community centered, community focused, really getting the impact from those within the community. Definitely businesses that are reeling from the pandemic. And the other one that I think is pretty prevalent and has so many different components to it is climate justice. making sure that we are taking the right steps to have an environment that's sustainable, that we are, we are taking the steps to deal with such an important issue with our climate. So those are kind of the ones that have been popping up more and more with just with the ask for sub caucuses alone. Those were some of the big ones that came up. Bless you.
Thank you. So, good thing that actually Garrison had Devon had that blow hard Mikamahu issues, blow young con a both side that jaw, being seen young simple how many of actually no shot chapter yona, the number E Mikamahu public safety, not Kono your car that people more choke a ban church, and a bully, or ban a bay church, and a don't hang up a bacon chain or got face so sad that don't need to drunk jay, don't need to to Kena, a better original a Garrison had that you down the Duja that Bambly Hako also bang a gotch, and a yin your that believe laying or your the basing your joy to have the people the Konoya copy, sang your gotch, and bay hatch被还是东西少多到被多被呢，就只要在actually 莫不领导上很过的被了我的这个被路上呢，我个容上就被就 king， 就当然的呢 public safety number number all 嘛，咪干嘛好 housing， 可能 housing 咯要还在不莫给不莫这找不到人呀，还就当的变一步的是我怕讲嘛，都可以这用医生用技术就技术呢不要被了我的这个被啥莫这呢个技行，就当的变一包还在头有这莫这找的有莫东西。到现在莫这咪干么好 homeless 不要，就那就东人家别路 park 没得包的，我就东人不 park 不的得给 highway 那不要，可能也很对面，别了我讲帮着东人在哈。chỉ ta lên đời number pay mà ta chỉ nó pay từ chuyện mỏ covid mỏ nó đau cho tôi này mỏ này mi cả mỏ business mỏ này mỏ lúc chế nó mỏ ô lò thank you sir Terry tôi này ô lò bên cái bảo thì mấy đứa trẻ cho nhẹ hè nó chỉ này từ mayor một chút city council bỏ lò cho bán sai mấy đứa kinh nè so họ nói vậy họ tôi này những chuyện nó sát chap so chỉ ta lên đời number block mà mi cả mỏ climate justice 可能考大 especially 比如某我哋呢被都包在一上就一上嘛在讨论那个路嘿在讨论路那了只要一按吼一样提就路那咖哩在讨姑嘛姑嘿喏咪讲么可能 climate 那 climate change 比如我哋讲 even though เป็น路上那比如我哋讲个班菜都呢 especially 都呢我哋那个波到让我落波节目到日子 so Garrison 他 demonstrate 的包样呢包的都呢了 actually 我下差不还波了 no ใช่do mayor 他 judge ใน city council 波了他做包样咯
họ chỉ nói là cái nhân lo từ thời gian nó chờ bây giờ mua chín gì nữa cái mua lúa gì or mua bắt đầu này bỏ tới lấy những trái chân tới lấy những trái lúa không ngờ tới chụp mua tới giờ tới này ba xã phong gì trong này là way to delegate là选的the precinct caucus cái này ở đây. So last question before you guys all head out, and I was just telling the audience, the question I was asking you is what are some of the resources if people have questions? We relayed the phone number in Hmong for Minneapolis. We Jay mentioned that there are some sites in that they've put up too. What are resources if folks have questions about the process additionally? And also, what if you belong to another party? I mean, we know our bias here, but we all do want to articulate that. We want a lot of participation in the democratic process. So Devin or Garrison?
Sure. Yeah, so I'll just start again. The minneapolisdfl.org is our website. You can find the complete information in Hmong on the website there. People can send us an email or call the phone number. We're happy to explain. The other thing is our Facebook page, facebook.com/MinneapolisDFL. We'll put all of our events on there. So any information you could ever want will be on the website and on the Facebook page, especially for the events. And yeah, we look forward to any questions. Happy to help. And to answer for the other political parties, the answer is I'm not sure. I know for in-person years, there's always the Republicans, Libertarians, and the Greens will put on caucuses. They may not put on one for every precinct, but they will have them. But in terms of this year, I just don't know the answer to that question, honestly.
Yeah, so pretty much the same. We will have all of this information for the PowerPoint slide that we've put together that really goes through the entire process, as well as the registration form is on our website, and it's in 5 different languages: English, Spanish, Somali, Hmong, and Karen. So folks can visit there to get that information. You can also email us at stpaul.dflmn at gmail.com. You can reach out to us on our Facebook page. And I'd say the other thing is that we're doing is we're actively working with so many partners within the community, whether it's the campaigns who are out there on the trails, or working with some of our other community stakeholders, whether it's your Take Actions or your Isaiahs or your labor leaders, on top of the countless volunteers who serve as Senate district chairs and ward chairs across the city. We're working with all of them because we know that they have such an ear to what's happening on the ground with everyone. It can help us relay a lot of this information. So if you know any of who those people are, definitely reach out to them as well, and they'll convey any questions that you might have back to us. So hope you are a part of this process, and we want everyone who wants to participate to be able to do so.
So Devin and Garrison, I wonder if I could ask you a quick question. I'm at the website, the Minnesota DFL website, and when I click on caucuses and convention, it's actually information about 2020. Where can I go to get the 2021 information?
For St. Paul, it'll be St. Paul, SAINT PAUL DFL.org.
Got it. So it's not the main DFL website.
Nope.
It's the city specific websites. Okay, fantastic. Yep. Thanks for that clarification.
And then same MinneapolisDFL.org for ours.
Yeah. So after Devin have Garrison when all like the tani watching lunong zine the mushai your website learn your high that you know MinneapolisDFL.org or yo tani St. Paul StPaulDFL.org. Chỉ đạo lên giờ tani mua Facebook the lợi mua like page nhau Facebook the income muốn tới giờ lợi cho giờ chạy nó rồi sẽ được bảo đó chỉ đạo lên nó cái thật sự là chẳng đó này fill mỗi từ delegate cái lợi chạy luôn không là chỉ đạo lên nó cái lợi mua email đó ít hồi St. Paul cái lợi mua hai cái talk lợi cho công hộ là ba là sau đó ba là thì bài đó sẽ được cho cái trong nó mua precinct caucus mua thật có chỗ này mua sĩ công về lúc trong là hụt precinct caucus nó nè and so lợi trong sẽ cái sẽ được những ba sau đó cái bây giờ bảo的sẽ được trong nó ổn định nó mua ba cho nên kia chỉ đạo lên nó cái sẽ được mua bomb bài nè yeah. So on behalf of our group tonight, want to thank Devin and Garrison for joining us. We're going to talk a little bit about sub-caucusing after this, but yeah, Garrison, any
one more thing. This is both Devin and I are both volunteers, and this is both a volunteer-led organization. So if you also want to volunteer in any way, please reach out to us. We're always looking for more folks who want to be a part of this process.
Yeah, cứ Garrison hay chuyện, người ta kalau lu chuyện tránh cha, người ta có sẽ được bảo vậy thì họ giờ họ lựa nó chuyện nụ nó là ô chỉ là ô bút đầu thế này, chỉ là lấy những món lựa họ lựa là ô lựa đốt nụ ta chỉ, còn nó chỉ lấy lịch sử là chỉ là bút đầu đâu cho công hộ nó the ba Democrat nó kia chúng nó vậy thì lần thứ sáu ba gì là chỉ ba email lỡ hoặc hu đó lỡ vậy thì nên mới chỉ là chỉ là ba đó.
I just want to say, stop victimizing the community. I used to volunteer, and I can say that the work that you and Devin are doing are very important. Volunteer bang Pakistan Democrat ko pota tatlim no po oya bolu or bang sa club po yang ki territory to cheer them. Senate district ko sang po na o plan le ban sa ba yatin si so ya me cha我在梦用帮到 support 到St. Paul DFL 和 Minneapolis DFL 因为我是 volunteer 我帮我不过被上课比较正如何我帮中海或者说的去组去帮也不一样和对这种还是找被路爬 Democrat DFL 他们到
Garrison, I'm so glad you said that because I think especially for folks in the Asian American community, in light of what happened last week, if we want the democracy that we all deserve, right, a reflective democracy, an equitable democracy, then it starts actually with participation in our local parties. It starts with precinct caucuses. So I really encourage folks who are watching tonight to reach out to Garrison, to reach out to Devin, and let's start that process of organizing.
Absolutely. And thank you three for all the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, y'all.
Yeah. All righty. So now we're going to continue, and Paku is going to talk a little bit about subcaucusing. So Paku ya deka kemenjir kero bishara takake subcaucusing na to you bata Devin the Garrison ya hamin ji taka ka kike na ta shia Paku mapa anti bai zero shira.
Okay. So Jean Shahi that made it basically Tana going sad that they tell you sad that precinct caucus we ya ikati jing hina go the dama the don't a watch ne clam or not chu my boy shy don't name the precinct caucus boy who go boy talk go move on to boy so can I ikati jing hin. So they know I'm gonna share my screen and I'm gonna talk again about I'm going to talk about subcaucusing. So we talked a little bit already about why precinct caucuses are so important because it actually is at the precinct caucus level that you get into the system, right? And then at the precinct caucus level, you go to the ward convention. And then actually at the ward convention, that's where you get the ticket to go to the city convention. So for folks who live in Minneapolis, this is really important. And you have to go all the way, if you want to be a delegate for the mayoral race, you have to go all the way to the city convention. If folks are really interested in only the city council races, you go to the ward conventions, right? For folks in St. Paul, the races that are up are going to be the mayoral race, so that's in the city convention, and the school board races, which is also city convention. So don't forget, the precinct caucus is your ticket into the whole system. So just as Devin and Garrison described, that is a different process of becoming a delegate than what we've done in the past. So I'm going to talk about how you do a sub-caucus, but I want to just preface it by saying that some of the things that I talked about here, about the number of people who come to it, the viability number, all of that is probably going to be calculated beforehand. So as soon as you register, which I just did, while we were all talking, I just went to the Minneapolis DFL site, I put in my address, and I was able to quickly register to be a delegate. And I have to fill out some more information, which I'll do later on. But that's what you need to do. And as long as people do that, I think by the time that the deadline ends, which I believe that Garrison said was going to be April 9th, when that happens, then the Democratic Party in St. Paul and Minneapolis, and I don't know what the process is going to be for the Republicans, but at least for the Democrats, after April 9th, they'll know how many people are going to be coming to these precinct caucuses. And because when you're registering, you have to just do what Garrison said, you're going to rank which sub-caucus you want to go to. They'll know by that time, after November 9th, they'll know not only how many people are coming to the precinct caucuses, they'll know what the viability number is based on the number of precincts. And I'm imagining that when you actually have the sub-caucus, that's when you can actually, do all the numbering and finagling to get the number of slots. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk about this, how it used to be done in terms of the slots. But just know that what I'm describing is probably going to be slightly different, and it's going to be all online. But the most important thing is that when you go into this sub-caucusing process, you know that there are just a predetermined number of slots that each precinct is going to have. And you're going to have to know already how many people are there. And that gives you the viability number. And what the viability number means is that any kind of sub-caucus, so what is a sub-caucus actually? Let me step back. A sub-caucus is just a fancy way of saying it's a group of people coming together. Okay, so Terry and myself and Jay, we could, if we were at one of these precinct caucuses and we were starting to do the sub-caucusing process, we could call a sub-caucus. We could call the group of us, and we're going to call ourselves the superheroes of Minnesota. Right? You can call yourself anything, but oftentimes if it's a campaign, they usually call it like the campaign, the candidate's name. If it's like they want to focus on an issue, they call it the issue's name. So if you're someone who is going to be, you're working for the, let's say, Melvin Carter campaign for mayor again, you might call a sub-caucus Melvin Carter for mayor. If you're someone who cares really deeply about, let's say, racial equity, you might call a sub-caucus for people who care about racial justice, right? So the sub-caucus is just a fancy way of saying a group of people. And the viability number tells you in this group of people, they have to have at minimum that number, that viability number, to be viable, to stay alive. If Jay and Terry and I called a caucus and the viability number is 5 and we only have 3 people, we're not alive anymore. We're not viable, which means that we have to split up and each go to a different sub-caucus. Or maybe we say all 3 of us are going to stick together and we're going to go as a group to another group, right? Another sub-caucus. And we're going to say, hey, we will join you guys and we'll make a difference, but you need to elect us then to be the delegate, right? We can negotiate if we stay together. Or we could just break apart. Terry wants to go to climate. I'm going to go for Melvin. Jay's going to go for racial justice. So the viability is really, number is very important because that's what at minimum you have to have for your sub-caucus, your group, to stay alive. And you actually keep doing this. Sometimes they predetermine the number of rounds, but often they keep doing this until each of the sub-caucuses that remain have the minimum number to be viable, right? And then when that happens, that's when you record it. And so maybe out a slot of 150, we did the sub-caucusing, there are only 10 slots, and we know that the viability number is 15. At the end of the day, whatever sub-caucuses still remain, they have at least 15 people in them. And then we take the list, the person who's running the precinct caucus, the caucus chair, that person will write down the names of all the caucuses, all the sub-caucuses, how many people they had, which means then we convert it into how many slots do they get. And then each of the sub-caucuses, they have to elect that number of people to be their delegates. Does that make sense? So then they record, the precinct chair records what were the sub-caucuses' name, who are the delegates that are going to come out of that sub-caucus, and at the end of the day, how many original members did they have each of those sub-caucuses. And then you have to write down your information, your address, your phone number, and that's how you come up with the list of delegates that are going to go to the ward convention. And the same thing happens at the ward convention to get to the city convention. And so that's the process of sub-caucusing. It may sound like, even though I've done it a lot, I'm like, it still can be confusing. So I want to let you all know there's a wonderful video. It's, if you go to YouTube and you just search for the DFL Senate District, which is SD 58 video and precinct caucus, they have an amazing 8-minute video that actually goes and they do animation to show you how a sub-caucus works. Again, I just want to give a caveat that this year's sub-caucus is going to look very different from that video, but the principles are going to be the same. And that's what's important.
So pako hake sub-caucus nona vilija pata be the haminji be minji saka precinct caucus lutong nona vilija be o sub-caucus da be da kashi fai ho I do ipa me jona e vilija be ta olinana.
Yeah. Yep, Terry ka hayo ko na jo ko dan tao jama mo don na tao hin to jo precinct caucuses ko bo pan Democrat pan Republican bo dan charge don na mo jo ko ward convention mo jo ka city convention na so maybe to on day kana mo I bo ji jo to tao ko to tama bo ko to mo jo ko ward convention hino na so bo ta you side jane I bo ji jo don na you side ja actually you have mo to ko don na mo jo ko ward convention mika ka precinct caucus process no ya koi coach ne ko mika ka process both side don't ni go don't ni no mo jo ko convention ka ward convention la city convention so la me ku do ha ta ka me the open ko yin no sha hin ku jo kho ta ka ha no they can chi mo jo ka video no ka can chi mo jo YouTube e ka ka shao ka search DFL SD58 video na e ka shai ka video no e ka video no ka ha ta po precinct caucus ti cha ha. Thanks so much.
Yeah. So yeah, So ka ke no ke ya ka ke to be la ba chơi ba or but li ba hai participate in democracy na ke being bo hai de de zhong in yo ji yong ni de 一天的ke sa de ya de 一天的ke bon ba zou le da shi ji da na ke being bo hai de ya nya de yu zhong de ba kana democrat na ke ka ke na yin ya ra ji de ta mo shi de ta mo shi gong e be ta bo na ka chang sha do shi de ha Jay, are you back? Are you back? I was gonna turn it over a little bit. So Paku's talked a little bit about what a precinct caucus is, kind of how it works. But I'm kind of curious in the couple minutes we have left. Jay, you run for office. What was your experience, right, with getting people out to precinct caucuses, and so how much work needs to happen to get folks to come out, and how do we make it really important, and especially Hyungna, if it's just all online, right? And so I think we tend to want someplace to go, but tell us a little bit about your experience. Since cái kia ở bên chỗ lần cái cái bố tại cái lưu động này trong cái cái bắt khai sẽ được nè.
I was at my first time that I ran. We went through the whole, showing up at the school, becoming delegates, and then the whole convention. And in my second term, I ran, which was last year around this time during the pandemic. Everything was online, and it created a lot of challenges, especially with Victor. Simone, I don't encourage you, I'm happy to hear that from both Devin Ha, Garrison about the improvements and how the party is trying to be more inclusive and be intentional about reaching out and being making sure that our communities who may not have the resources to access online have the access. And so, ni chi no, shokot to nuna me, you me to ke me, all that to ching yang yo lu sai, go pack man lu sai chama che me yeming. Trang tê là giờ mong vô hạt tạ tu nô là tu mới bù trong cái lục bán sáu đồng chỉ dùng cái xử lý chi chi chơi khi hành đâu là cái dạng tan lụa cái tôi nhớ trên của nữa là chỉ có mua everything online chỉ mấy tôi email mong sao mong bông sao mà ít tại survey tôi cho mấy internet ya mấy chip báo chỉ internet đó là số cho bông sao là tôi cho mấy là chỉ tu ở cái sai là phát mà bông hồ sơ thông công cho mấy thằng còn bạn cho mấy thằng còn mấy cái ta xem mấy giờ mong tại tụi của Parkman lục bang trang mong ở tụ Democrat lục là tụ tung rồi, tôi dùng hình式và hàng có dùng tiếng nó.
Well, thanks, anybody. I think, are there any last words folks want to say about the precinct caucus process tonight? It's fairly, it's fairly wonky, but I think when we think about, how, when we talk about a representative democracy, like how we represent ourselves, then the local level meeting, it makes a lot of sense, right? And so we start off very much in our own backyards, in our own neighborhoods. And so
Terry, I just wanted to add that, you had started this conversation, that the reason why we started this show was because there was a lot of disinformation, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that, what we just talked about precinct caucuses, it is wonky. And I think this is what people fearful. They're like, it's too much. I don't know how to do it. But I want to tell you, there are people here to help you, and we have to get through it, because it's exactly when people keep us ignorant and we don't know what these rules are and the wonkiness of it, that then we're not in this positions of power to make decisions. And so Jay and myself and Terry, we're here to help you all. And Devin and Garrison, I think that was a real good faith to come out and talk to us tonight. And let's figure it out, because I think actually this year it's going to be easier to participate, and so let's do it. Let's get through that kind of lack of information, and let's get this knowledge.
Yeah. And Terry, you ran your own political campaign for office too, for the endorsement.
It's a lot of work to get people to come out, right? And so precinct caucus na je yung talk shi to shi gong to on day ka ga mo na je yung hai ga lo to shi gong bi lu je ga da shi yi tie chi kong de jo nun na la do de jo mo nun da shi de chi kong er yi tie de ge lo shi lu chen jean mignon sha je mi dong sing zi de na. And so hai ga shi to shi gong yin ji yung ni li ba go hai de jo hyong no ya de le bo ka le bo e go or internet whole computer so de jo yung ni da shi bing bo hai the to so each the je ling in your tail nichi the anki or nichi bo shi internet na or that she li je the ba ko hai the je be nhân là nó be ổn định lại be là ba chơi the ha chỉ ta lên the je ning nó hay tia op jam pa Democrat nhau hôm Minneapolis the hồ St. Paul the je ling mo ke la ba to je be sang cái nó ya the ni sa participate bây giờ bị đông nó xong nó nè chỉ ta lên nó chị lý bác có hay nó chị tại khởi kỹ nó chị ít theo lợi nhưng hay cái ô nhớ thâu là của chị tao tao nó chị tới rồi của chị xả lần đó nên chị cộng nè但是bây giờ chị tao tao tại lợi tại bây chị chờ này nhưng chị我实际上还个实力是的都是共的chị lợi nhưng chị xả出来了lợi nhưng chị lợi nhưng tại chị thu la tại giờ mong là mà lợi nhưng chị多是共哩哎呀tại他嗰度那bây giờ就係就cái trái đó是的他包哎是的他都是共nè.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Great. Well, no shame no no me ton be shi ta hai. Next week jana ton be shi ta na.
Yeah. Thank you very much
Tốt
for
ha.
tuning in. Yeah.
Tốt mà từ vì mong được cảm ơn cô cho bé ô cô này dùng nhiều số thật to mà tăng chi.
Yeah.
Shinji.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Have a good
Thanks,
night, everybody.
everyone.
Happy caucusing.